had no idea pumpkins came in any color other than orange until I discovered massive 30-pound blue pumpkins. And I had never seen anything like it in my life, so I knew I needed to buy this giant gem in the produce aisle, bring it home, open it up, experiment with it a little bit, and grow my own massive blue pumpkin patch.
Did you say you're gonna get a hernia?
Yeah. I know, that was a lot to take in, so allow me to explain. I really thought pumpkin pie season was over, so when I stumbled upon this thing, I was excited for it to last a little longer. Plus, this thing is absolutely massive, the largest pumpkin I've ever seen in my life, so I was a little bit nervous to get down and dirty, but the journey had to begin somehow. So I lugged it home, got a little workout in, and then got to work. First, I had to figure out a way to actually break it open, but that outer shell was very thick and extremely hard, and so it took me a while to break through the surface to find out what it actually even looks like inside. I wondered if it would be the same orange color as a pumpkin, and at that point I wasn't even sure if I'd be able to break it open at all. I was having a little bit of a hard time, but I was determined. I sliced open the bottom half and then spun it around and sliced the top half, and by the grace of the gourd gods, I was finally able to crack it open, which of course called for a little celebration. And to my surprise, opening it revealed flesh with a golden interior, a pumpkin dipped in twilight with what looked to be like a few hundred seeds at least living inside. It was like if a pumpkin and a squash had a baby, this would be the baby. And it was in this moment that I got curious to know if it would taste different than a pumpkin. As I extracted all the seeds so we could start working on the golden flesh, I came to realize that this massive thing is called a blue Hubbard. They can weigh up to 50 pounds, and apparently it tastes sweet like a sweet potato but nutty like a hazelnut. They take 130 days to grow, which is 40 days longer than a regular pumpkin, so that makes them late season harvests, which I guess explains why this was available for purchase in January. I stopped seeing regular pumpkins and pumpkin pie for sale around the end of November, so this was a real treat. Well, for one, of course I had to save the seeds and bake them, and once they were ready in a bowl, I got to cutting up the blue pumpkin even more so that it could actually fit inside my oven. And I knew I was gonna have to bake this thing in 2 batches because it was too big even for my oven. And this thing was so massive that we had more than enough flesh to experiment, even more than just with the seeds. So I decided that I would make blue pumpkin pie, blue pumpkin soup, some blue pumpkin dog treats, and some roasted blue pumpkin seeds. Oh, and of course, we cannot forget about taking some of the seeds and growing them into a blue pumpkin patch, which by the way actually grew into a massive patch. Just wait. But let me start with what it first turned into. I got the first batch of blue pumpkin into the oven, and halfway through, after about 30 minutes, I pierced it with a fork to see if it was squishy enough to move on to the next step. It wasn't. So I waited another 45 minutes and it was finally up to squish par. So I lugged it out of the oven and started separating the flesh from the outer shell. So now I had this flesh to work with, and the second batch went straight into the oven to bake and get squished up. The first thing that I decided to do after those seeds was make some pumpkin soup. I cut up some ginger, garlic, turmeric, onions, and fried them until they were golden. Set it aside, got my food processor out, and added the blue golden pumpkin right inside. But I ran into a problem because my processor wouldn't turn on. I thought maybe I added too much pumpkin to it, but by the grace of the gourd gods, I got it to turn on and we were back in action. I processed it, and once it was all smooth, I added the ginger, garlic, turmeric, and onion, blended that all together, did a first little taste test of course, and was astonished to realize how rich and nutty and delicious the flavor of this majestic blue thing really was. I was excited to be having an entire day filled with everything pumpkin, and it wasn't even pumpkin season. Well, I added my concoction to the pot, then added some oregano, bay leaves, thyme, basil, rosemary, marjoram, and a little bit more garlic powder. You can never have too much garlic. Also added a little bit of salt and a little bit of water and tasted it as it simmered to make sure the flavor was just right. And soon, we had pumpkin soup. It was so good. I was excited, and as it cooled off, I needed some ingredients from the store for the next thing. So I made my way to get a bunch of much needed ingredients for not 1, but 2 green, mean pumpkin pie machines. Well, majestic blue, but you get the point. Immediately, I started on our pumpkin pie. I added pumpkin, eggs, sugar, vanilla, cinnamon, nutmeg, grated ginger, and evaporated milk. Poured that all into some graham cracker crust. Definitely could have mixed the cinnamon more and probably used my food processor here too, but there was a lot going on and there was just so much pumpkin basically coming out of my ears that I just decided to do it this way. Poured it in my graham cracker crust, and I had to figure out a way to actually get it into the oven. It was overflowing and I spilled it all over the floor. But you live and you learn, and you get a towel to wipe it up because pumpkin pie triumphs everything. But the problem was I had never made pumpkin pie before, so I was a little bit nervous but excited to see how it would turn out. As those two baked in the oven, I still had so much pumpkin left that I thought maybe I can make my dog some pumpkin treats and freeze them so he can live like a king, even though he already does. But I just love him so much, okay? I processed some pumpkin, oats, and peanut butter. 3 great ingredients for nice doggy treats. Ask me why I processed the treats for Raffi and not the pumpkin pie for me. I couldn't tell you, but everything was happening so fast, and by now it had already been like 7 hours of cooking with this thing, so I was like, it's all good, you know? Usually I just grow things. I'm not much of a chef, but I do try my best. Anywho, I poured the concoction into a pie dish, baked that into a little cake, and I would cut it up into dog-sized pieces when it was ready. But it was Raffi who would be the ultimate critic on the quality of these treats. And anywho, the last step before actually growing the seeds into my very own blue pumpkin patch was to bake the seeds. I just added some avocado oil onto the seeds, threw them onto some foil, and baked them for a while. And as the doggy treats baked and the pumpkin pie baked and the seeds were baking, I got ready to germinate some of the seeds, my favorite part. I peeled off the outer layer of skin and revealed the naked little seeds, got them on a damp piece of paper towel to germinate, and after about a week, they grew some tails. And once I got them in soil, they grew so quickly. I never expected to actually grow blue pumpkins, but soon, before I knew it, I had pumpkins growing out of my ears, and I was so excited. I noticed a lot of bees flying around the garden and realized that because these things are so large, they require a lot of energy to grow. So they rely heavily on pollinators like bees to grow into a reputable size and fruit quality. And yes, technically these twilight gourds are actually considered a fruit in the eyes of a botanist because of the seeds that it grows. But without the bees, they wouldn't grow properly at all. It's also nice to know that these are related to the cucumber, the watermelon, the pumpkin, and basically any squash or gourd that you can think of. Some people even hollow these things out and use them for crafting and carving into bowls or birdhouses or natural water vessels or even musical instruments like maracas or rattles. But honestly, these gourds are a great example of how a single plant can serve so many purposes, from being massive and beautiful to providing food and then material for various uses. They can even last through the entire winter, so they provide long-lasting food supplies to communities. Well, of course, the dog treats and pumpkin pie were finally ready to come out of the oven. Not after all these weeks, but I had to show you my pumpkin patch I grew, of course. The dog treats came out amazing. I tasted them myself, they're human grade. I cut them into little bite-sized squares, and the only thing that really mattered here was whether or not Raffi liked them. We got the lick of the lips approval, he really liked them. But since they had gooey peanut butter in them, I put them in the freezer to make sure they didn't mold over and go bad, and that was a great idea, because now Raph has treats for whenever he's a good boy, which is every second of the day, every day, obviously. Anywho, the pumpkin pie was the real question in hand as to whether or not it would turn out. I made some homemade whipped cream by whipping up some cream and honey to make for a great pie topping, because you cannot eat pumpkin pie without some nice whipped cream. And finally, the pie was ready to come out of the oven. It looked pretty good. Still think I should have mixed in the cinnamon a little bit better, but the ultimate moment of truth came. I cut it up, added some whipped topping, and I was so very proud that it turned out to be so tasty and so good. That nutty taste from the hazelnut was insane, and it really did kind of taste like a sweet potato. My favorite thing ever is butternut squash ravioli. Well, this almost took the cake, but I still think I like butternut squash ravioli a little bit better. Anywho, as for the seeds, they turned out okay, but of course I would rather grow them instead of eat them, if you know what I mean. And basically now, I will never assume what color any fruit or vegetables come in, and I'm sure now you can guess that all I'm thinking of is the hunt that I'm about to put myself on for the next green or purple or pink pumpkin that's bigger than my head that I can experiment with.
Carry this going home, I think you will get a very